It was the evening of October 12, 1893, when the first whispers about the Grayson family began to echo across the small town of Ravenscroft, a place tucked away in the misty hills of northern England. The townspeople lived simple lives, bound by routine and superstition, but their peace was always shadowed by the looming figure of Grayson Manor, a sprawling estate that sat perched on the cliffside like a watching sentinel. For decades, no one had dared to go near it after sundown, for the manor was home to stories so dark and twisted that even the bravest hunters and soldiers would not utter the name Grayson without shuddering. The Graysons were once a noble and respected family, their lineage dating back to the medieval era when Lord Cedric Grayson was knighted for valor in battle. They were wealthy landowners, known for their sprawling acres of farmland, their fine horses, and their vast library of rare books. But as with many great dynasties, their grandeur slowly gave way to greed, secrecy, and obsession. By the late 1800s, the family's reputation was less about honor and more about rumors of strange rituals, madness that seemed to run in their bloodline, and an uncanny series of deaths that left the people of Ravenscroft unsettled. The tragedy began with Elias Grayson, the patriarch, in 1893. Elias was a man of intelligence and charm, a respected scholar in the sciences, but also known for his fascination with the occult. His obsession began innocently, with alchemy and ancient texts, but quickly spiraled into something far darker. Locals spoke of lights glowing from the manor windows at ungodly hours, chants carried on the wind, and even the sound of screams muffled by the storm. Elias had inherited not only the manor, but also generations of secrets, journals written by his ancestors detailing strange experiments, forbidden knowledge, and an insatiable hunger for immortality. Elias's wife, Margaret, was admired for her beauty and grace, but behind the walls of Grayson Manor, she lived a life of silent suffering. Rumor had it that Elias forced her to participate in his rituals, binding her with oaths and secrets she dared not break. Servants came and went, many leaving without explanation, their wages left unpaid, their belongings abandoned in haste. Some claimed they had seen Margaret wandering the halls in the dead of night, her white nightgown soaked in tears, whispering prayers to saints long forgotten. Their children were not spared from the curse of the Grayson bloodline. The eldest son, Thomas, was groomed to inherit the estate. At first, he was a bright young man, full of promise, but those who knew him began to notice strange changes as he matured. His eyes would glaze over in moments of silence, his speech would falter as if voices whispered in his ears, and he often isolated himself in the family crypt beneath the manor. There were tales of him carrying bones into the house, claiming they spoke to him, guiding him toward truths the living could never understand. The villagers said Thomas was no longer a boy but a vessel, carrying something ancient and foul within him. The younger daughter, Eliza, was the light of the family, a girl of laughter and music, often seen playing the piano in the grand hall. But her joy faded quickly after her 12th birthday. It was on that night that the great storm struck Ravenscroft, tearing roofs from homes and flooding the valley. The townsfolk recalled seeing lightning strike the manor not once but 3 times in succession. The next morning, Eliza was never the same. She spoke little, stared often at shadows, and her once graceful playing on the piano turned to haunting, discordant melodies that made even the bravest villagers cross themselves when they heard it drifting from the manor windows. By 1896, the family was fractured. Death came suddenly, and without reason. Servants who dared to speak claimed that Elias had been performing a ritual to summon knowledge from beyond the grave. That very winter, Margaret was found lifeless in her bed, her face pale as snow, her lips twisted as though she had died mid-scream. No doctor could determine the cause, and Elias insisted it was illness, but the villagers knew better. They said she had been consumed by the darkness her husband had courted for years. After Margaret's death, Elias withdrew completely into his studies. He rarely emerged from his library, where he kept shelves of ancient manuscripts bound in leather and skin. On stormy nights, flickering lights could be seen through the high windows, and the sound of scratching, like nails against wood, echoed into the valley. Some swore they saw figures, shadows of people long dead, moving across the grounds of the manor, their hollow eyes watching the town below. Tragedy struck again in 1898, when young Eliza was found drowned in the manor's fountain. Her lifeless body was discovered by a stable boy who quit his post that very hour, running through the town screaming that her eyes had still been open, and they had glowed faintly in the moonlight. The family buried her in the crypt with their ancestors, but after that night, her piano began to play on its own. Townsfolk passing near the manor would hear faint, eerie notes drifting across the mist, even when no living soul was inside the hall. Thomas the heir grew more disturbed after his sister's death. His journals, later recovered by historians, described vivid nightmares of faceless figures, voices calling him by name, and visions of fire and blood. He wrote of a deal struck generations ago by Lord Cedric Grayson himself, a pact that tied the family's soul to something unholy in exchange for power and prosperity. Thomas believed that every tragedy, every death, was part of that bargain, and that the family could never escape it. In 1901, Elias himself met a grisly end. His body was discovered in the crypt, sprawled before the family altar. His chest had been torn open, his heart missing, and on the walls were symbols written in blood, words no one in the town could translate. Strangely, there were no signs of forced entry, no footprints but his own. Many believed Elias had finally succeeded in his ritual, offering himself to the darkness he had worshipped for so long. After Elias's death, Thomas inherited the manor, but his reign was short-lived. Within months, he disappeared entirely, leaving behind only his journals and a single chilling entry. "The shadows have come for me. I can hear Eliza's song calling me home. I will not resist." His body was never found. Some believed he had thrown himself from the cliff into the sea, others that he had joined his father in some otherworldly pact. But those who lived closest to the manor swore they saw him walking the grounds at night, his eyes hollow, his voice echoing words that made no sense. By the early 1900s, the manor had been abandoned. Windows were shattered by storms, ivy crawled up the walls, and the grand gates rusted shut. Yet the legends never ceased. Travelers passing through Ravenscroft spoke of a woman's cry drifting from the cliffside, of lights flickering in the abandoned windows, and of piano notes that seemed to follow them on the wind. For over a century, the Grayson Manor stood as a monument of fear. Historians tried to piece together the truth, some attributing the tragedies to madness, isolation, and the weight of inherited trauma. But others believed there was something truly unholy about the family, something beyond mortal explanation. Paranormal investigators visited the site in the 20th century, capturing recordings of voices whispering, doors slamming shut on their own, and cold spots in the crypt where no living being dared to linger. One team claimed to have seen the figure of a young girl sitting at the piano, her fingers pressing invisible keys, her face pale and blank. Today the story of the Grayson family is told as both a cautionary tale and a mystery unsolved. The manor still stands, its roof sagging, its walls crumbling, yet no one dares to live there. The curse of the Graysons is said to linger still, carried on the wind and in the shadows of the halls. Some say the family is not gone, only waiting, bound to their ancestral home until the pact made centuries ago is fulfilled. And so, when the fog rolls in heavy over Ravenscroft and the bells of the town church toll midnight, the villagers still whisper prayers and shut their windows tight, for they know that the history of the Grayson family is not just a story, but a reminder that some legacies are written not in honor or glory, but in blood and shadows.